Up, guys? 1-2 yesterday. Obviously, not exactly what I wanted. The late game, Seattle Mariners and Chicago White Sox. That wound up. The bet wound up getting canceled. If you had the Woo matchup in your bet there, Woo got scratched late, which was bizarre, and he wound up getting replaced by another guy who was brought up to make his major league debut. Which at that point I would still have said maybe the under was worth a look. I didn't do it. The line had moved up to 7.5. The under was juiced like minus 120 or so to the under. I think maybe you could have gotten minus 115 on the under 7.5, and that actually did hit. The game was sitting at 7 for the last few innings and did not go above the 7. Unfortunately, I did not wind up playing that one because it would have made the day 2-2. But yeah, the 1-2. Braves just didn't get there. Suarez did not pitch well, and he still escaped, allowing, I think, no runs or maybe one run. I don't know how that happened with the amount of base runners that he was putting on. Fried didn't do very well either. And then Pittsburgh, that was a 0-0 game late in the game. Skeens had a good start again, but on the other side, whoever was pitching, Mikolas for St. Louis was shockingly good yesterday as well. So that game was scoreless late in the game, but Pittsburgh wound up getting it done. And then what was the other play that I had? I don't even remember. Oh, Toronto, Milwaukee. I don't even know what to say about that. Carlos Rodriguez, not a great debut start. Didn't make it through 4 innings, which I didn't really expect. Most of his stats weren't that bad, but he was too hittable. He gave up too many hits, and that was just the problem. And somehow Kikuchi wound up throwing shutout balls, so whatever. We move on to today. I have a play in the NBA game, but this line is kind of getting away from us to the point where I'm going to say that there's not that much value in it anymore, but you might still be able to find a creative way to do this, which means that I'm taking the Dallas Mavericks, unfortunately, against my Celtics. I think this is the spot where you got to do it, but this line is up from Mavs minus 1.5, which is where I got it. I got minus 1.5 up to minus 2.5 with juice now. So this line is moving up on the Mavs. 65% of the tickets on the Mavs, so they're still public. Even though we've seen them lose the first 2 games, the public is still coming in on them. But maybe it's kind of the effect where, the Mavs, it's a must win, basically, which it is. But I think that when you're playing a team that isn't a must win and it's the finals and they're not laying that many points, really. If you're asking them to lay a giant spread, that's a different thing, but you're basically just asking them to win the game. So I think that motivating factor does come into play, and it does make sense to play them. But up to 2.5 now, I don't know exactly about that. And they got 81% of the cash, so the line has moved up on the Mavs. The cash looks like it's coming in on the Mavs at a higher rate than the tickets are, so the Mavs seem to be the side here. But again, the fact that it's 2.5, if you factor in the fact that the Celtics are basically around a 7-point favorite at home, the Mavs should probably be, the game should probably be closer to a pick'em or Celtics 1 in this game, but it opened Mavs minus 1.5. But I still said that 1.5 is still so close to just basically picking a team to win the game. I was I'm going to do it. But now that it's up to 2.5, it's a little bit, it's at the point where maybe you want to play Dallas Mavericks money line, even though you probably have to lay a little bit extra on that. I don't know what it would be right now, minus 140, 130, something maybe in that range. Maybe that would be the way to play this, because I do like the Mavs side. This is it for the Mavs. I think the Celtics will wind up winning this series. The one issue with playing the Mavs, I guess, is that the Celtics matchup-wise have the edge here. They spread out the floor. The Mavs are not really equipped to defend a team that spreads out their offense like the Celtics do, and they bring Porzingis out to the perimeter, although Porzingis, assuming he's going to play, Porzingis does have an ankle injury, but it seems like he's going to play through it. Luka is, of course, listed on the injury report, as he has been basically all postseason. He's playing with injured ankles, injured knee, or whatever, but it seems like it doesn't even affect him. I think he had a triple-double last game. It's it might be affecting his defense a little bit. It seems like guys can just kind of blow by him defensively. So he is a little bit of a liability out there in defense. His offense has been fine, other than the fact that the Celtics took away all of his passing opportunities in game 1. He did better in game 2, obviously. So the injury factor, I think the line is basically, kind of telling you that probably both of these guys are going to play, but maybe it's skewed a little bit towards the Mavs because of the Porzingis uncertainty, because of that injury. But it does seem like he is going to play through it because, I mean, this is the finals. Like, what do you have left? You only have a few games left in the season, basically. So it's like you're not going to be saving yourself for anything unless you think your career is going to get destroyed by re-injuring it. But he re-injured his ankle late in game 2. The other thing, besides all that, so these are like, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I am going to be on the Mavs. These are like reasons why I might be a little bit hesitant about it, but not enough to actually stay off it. But the matchup advantages for the Celtics are there. The Porzingis injury situation may be kind of a negative for the Celtics, and the fact that the Celtics didn't play well in game 2 and they still won. So is that going to be like their bad game, and is it going to have them focused in game 3? Like we saw in the first 2 series, they actually outright lost game 2 at home, and that really focused them in game 3, and they came out on the road and dominated. And the Celtics have been really good on the road. They're undefeated on the road this postseason, but of course they've been big favorites in like all those games on the road against inferior opponents, and that's not the case in this game. But even so, they have been good on the road. So those are all things to keep in mind, some drawbacks there, and the fact that the Celtics didn't play well in game 2 and still won the game. That kind of tells you that they do have a bunch of like edges. When they can play a game, they could shoot pretty poorly and only hit like 20-something% from 3 or whatever and still win the game. That kind of tells you that the Celtics are firing on all cylinders right now. But again, this is going to be a place they have to go to Dallas now, and Dallas is completely on the ropes. So I think that it does still make sense to play Dallas in this one, despite all that. And the Celtics, if the Celtics won, if Dallas won outright in game 2, I might say differently about this, and I might actually like be on the Celtics in this one. But because the Celtics wound up still winning the game, whatever, this is it for Dallas, man. They're down 0-2. No team has ever come back from down 0-3. So the Mavs know, like, this is it. Like, this is probably going to be their game. This is like basically an elimination game, and you're pretty much just asking them to win the game, which is what they need to do here. So I think they're going to be highly motivated here. The series shifts to Dallas, where Kyrie gets to kind of forget about everything that's going on, where he's getting heckled incessantly in Boston. He has not played well against Boston, though, in general. Even in his home games, he hasn't played well. Since leaving the Celtics, he's 0-12 against the Celtics. So that doesn't look good either. The Celtics know how to take him out of the game, basically, but I do think that Dallas is going to wind up getting this one game. I still think the Celtics should win the series, but this is the one spot where Dallas down 0-2. It's a very good spot in playoff series when a team falls down 0-2, come back home. If a team falls down 0-2 at home and they go on the road, I think that's also very strong, which we saw with like Dallas against Minnesota, or excuse me, not Dallas, Denver against Minnesota. But teams down 0-2 tend to be a pretty strong play. They wind up being highly, highly motivated, whereas the Celtics, maybe they can get a little bit overconfident, even though they know they didn't play well in game 2. Is it going to be a situation where it's like, we didn't play well, but we still won? So is that going to be making them maybe not show up totally focused for this one? I don't know, but I'm on the Mavs -1.5 for the reasons that I just stated. Tends to be a strong type of angle historically. And moving to Major League Baseball, a couple of things that I looked at here, but I didn't quite want to do. Oh, I have to handicap Cleveland, Cincinnati on the fly here. Excuse me, I didn't actually look. Let me do this real quick. This would be a situation where I would potentially look to play an under with 2 pretty good starting pitchers in that one, but Lodolo, very small sample size, but Cleveland's been able to hit him a little bit, so I'm going to stay off that one. Looking at the market real quick on that one, see if it indicates anything on the under in that one. The market in that one is actually indicating towards the under a little bit. I'm going to stay off it, though. Let me see. So I lean to Arizona. I'm just going to give out some leans real quick because I think Ciccone, the better young pitcher against Anaheim's Soriano, and Ciccone hasn't been seen before by Anaheim, and Anaheim's pretty weak offensively. So I do like Arizona. It looks like they're pretty public, but they might have more of the cash than the tickets on them. Line looks like it's moved slightly against them, but I don't know. So I do lean to Arizona in that one slightly. Slight lean to the Cubs as well. They have more of the cash in the tickets, even though they are slightly public as well. They have more of the cash on them. That line has moved in their direction as well, down on Tampa Bay from -125 to -114. I think Assad is the better of those 2 pitchers against Savale. Tampa Bay does not have much experience against Assad, and Tampa also won yesterday, so maybe it's kind of a bounce back scenario for the Cubs here. but Assad's going to bring that youth and like unfamiliarity, even though he does walk too many guys and he's not like the greatest strikeout pitcher, but Savale has kind of bad numbers this year too, as far as he's been too hittable and allowed too many base runners. And I think the Cubs are at least somewhat familiar with him. Was almost looking to potentially play an under in, what else was it going to be? I had two where I was like, I might want to play an under. Yeah, an under in the White Sox-Seattle game yet again. You have pitcher-friendly park. You have an offense in the White Sox that really struggles. Seattle's offense not really that great either. Jonathan Cannon, young pitcher, doesn't have a cannon arm. He's not really a guy that comes in and throws high heat against you, but he is still a young guy in his debut season who hasn't been seen before by the Mariners hitters. So Cannon, and he hasn't pitched that badly, so he could have a little bit of an advantage there against Bryce Miller, who's one of the young arms for Seattle, who's quite good as well. And the White Sox definitely have not hit him well. I think they're somewhere in like the range of like a 114 batting average and like 40 career at bats against him. So Miller has had his way with these White Sox hitters. So I do like an under in that one. It's just not quite one where I really want to do it. The market is all indicating on the under too, though. It's open 7.5 juice to the over. It's down to 7.5 juice to the under now with 59% of the cash on the under, 70% of the tickets on the over. So some sort of pros versus Joes kind of look to that total market there in that one. The one thing that really keeps me off of it, though, is the bullpen scenario. The White Sox don't really have a good bullpen at all to begin with. Seattle's is pretty good, but both teams have kind of taxed their bullpen over the last couple of games. So I don't quite trust the bullpens to keep that thing under the low total of 7.5. But I would only play the under in that one still, though. I would not want to fade that pitching matchup there as far as the under is concerned. And I also like looking over in the Yankees-Royals game, where I don't see percentages on this yet, but that total has been lined way high at 10.5. And I don't see any movement yet on it. It looks like it might even be juiced to the over, although you can probably find 10.5 at straight up, minus 110 as well. And that pitching matchup looks like it's pretty conducive to an over because you got Poteet on the Yankees side, who's a guy they've kind of thrust into the rotation as like the last man in the rotation. Even though his numbers look good on the season, he does not go deep into games. Yankees bullpen is good, so that's a little bit of a concern there, but both of these offenses are able to score runs. Poteet, I don't expect him to go very deep into the game. And then on the other side, Kansas City's having to use Dan Altavilla, who is a guy who's been in the bullpen, I think, and he's like in his 30s, and he's never made a start in his major league career. Going back to like 2015, 2016, he's been in the majors and been a reliever for his entire career. So I don't know what you're going to get out of him. I don't expect that he would go deep either. So that game looks like it's going to be early bullpens are going to be involved in that one. So it's not it seems like it's a game where you could probably expect some runs to get scored in that one. And the Yankees almost put the thing over by themselves in last night's game. I think they actually did. They scored 10 runs. Kansas City only scored 1. But that looks like it's a game where I would only play the over as high as that total is lined. That starting pitching matchup doesn't look like it's one that's really going to get the job done on either side. So I'm going to expect probably some runs in that one. But the game I'm actually going to play here is going to be to fade the Philadelphia Phillies, which Philadelphia was in a fade spot yesterday, and they still won against my Red Sox. Philadelphia was returning from London. They played a 2-game series against the Mets in London. I hate these like American sports. They're having these like, I don't know, international Europe games now, whatever. It's all just kind of ridiculous. It sets up these ridiculous travel spots. Although first Philly did have a day off coming back from that. And I think the Mets have actually maybe had 2 days off. But of course they wound up playing yesterday too, I guess. So I guess both teams have 1 day off, I think. But Philly was in a spot where they were returning from that, having to go to Boston. And usually when a team is like coming back from like a weird time zone shift like that, and they're really not used to it in baseball, because Major League Baseball hasn't really done anything like that, you kind of expect the hitting can kind of have their timing thrown off and go cold, and that is what happened with Philly yesterday. And they were up against Cutter Crawford for Boston, who I don't think had that much familiarity with, and he's been pitching surprisingly well this season. One of the couple pitchers for Boston who have been surprisingly good. And Boston's had a few pitchers who pitched pretty well and kind of been under the radar with him and Houck. And then the guy I'm going to talk about today, Pivetta, has also pitched well, though he's less under the radar than the other two guys. Kind of a staple of the rotation. But Crawford didn't do that badly yesterday. But the one kind of big question mark in the game yesterday was actually Zach Wheeler, because, of course, he's like the ace. Well, him and Suarez are kind of like double aces in Philadelphia's rotation. They both basically have been ace quality pitchers this year. But Wheeler came into that game in 55 at bats against Red Sox hitters, not having done well against these Red Sox hitters. So we didn't know what we were going to get out of him, really. The Red Sox hit like 333 off him lifetime coming into that game. But Wheeler did pitch well. And even though the Phillies' bats were completely cold and they actually had half of their runs, 2 of their 4 runs wound up being on this ridiculous error at first base by the Red Sox, where it was basically a shore ground out and they couldn't field it at first base. I think with the bases loaded or with 2 guys on, and things just unraveled from that point for the Red Sox a little bit early in the game. And the Philly wound up scoring multiple unearned runs off of that. So Philly actually only scored 2 earned runs in the game. So their offense was not on point, which was expected. But the question mark, which is the reason why I didn't play the game, was because I didn't exactly want to fade Wheeler despite his bad numbers against Boston. And he still came out wheeling and dealing, and he pitched well in that game. So moving on to today, though, I think we have another spot. Philly's been a road favorite in both of these games. I mean, they are the better team, and they're the team with the better record. But I think it's probably unwarranted in this matchup. I actually think the Red Sox have the edge in this matchup. And even though Philly has the better offense, I still think that they're being overvalued a bit here. At some point, it's got to catch up with them, man. They're like a public road favorite multiple times in a row here. Something's got to give here. And in this one, Philly sitting at minus 120, whereas yesterday they were like minus 150, which you're not getting any value in these lines with Philadelphia, man. Today, they're 78% of the tickets on Philly. They're very public. Only 55% of the cash, so a lot less of the cash. The cash looks like it's closer to evenly split, basically, which tells you that some of the bigger bets are coming in on the other side on the home underdog Red Sox. And I think for good reason in this one. Philly, of course, much more public than that. Not seeing any reverse line movement, at least not yet on this one, despite looking like more of the bigger bets are coming in on the Red Sox. And I think that's okay. I think full game is still okay, too, because the Red Sox bullpen is actually not that bad. Neither of these teams' bullpens are that bad. And the bullpen situation, I don't think, is really an advantage or disadvantage one way or the other. Both pitchers did pretty well in the game, went pretty deep in the game yesterday for these two teams. Phillies used 2 of their better relievers to hold off the Red Sox and get the hold in that game. So they did use their closer, Alvarado, and Strahm, who they kind of converted from a starter into one of their late inning guys who's been pitching quite well in that role. And the Red Sox used 3 of their relievers. So I don't think there's that much of an advantage one way or the other in the bullpen situation here. So I don't think there's that much of a reason to take the bullpens out of the equation here. And then looking at the starting pitching matchup, I think it's a little bit misleading here, man, because people are going to come in and look at these 2 starting pitchers and think that Christopher Sanchez is the better of these 2 pitchers. God, these allergies, man. Oh, pollen all over the place. Got to wash my car with all this pollen in Boston. Christopher Sanchez has the better ERA out of these 2 pitchers, but I'm going to go ahead and say he's not actually the better pitcher, even though I give Pivetta a lot of shit for not being as good as we want him to be. But Sanchez, with that 2.71 ERA, I think it's misleading because his whip is 1.34, man. I mean, that whip is quite high. That's indicating that his ERA should not be as low as it is. He's kind of getting away with putting men on base, man. He's given up 68 hits in 66 and a third innings and walked 21 guys. So that whip is bad. He's put way too many men on base, and he's only struck out 59. So his strikeout rate isn't really that high either. So something's got to give at some point, man. When you're putting this many guys on base, it's like something has to turn around. Something has to happen. Although recently he's actually lowered his amount of walks. He hasn't walked more than 1 guy in each of his last 4 starts, but none of them are really against good offenses besides the most recent one against Milwaukee. So he is coming off a good start against Milwaukee. And does that mean he's going to be in line for maybe a little bit of a regression, a letdown here? Maybe. In an unfriendly pitching environment here in Fenway Park against an offense that isn't that terrible. that terrible. That could be the case. And Sanchez has actually faced a lot of weak offenses this year, man. If you look at a guy's like slate, like for starting pitchers this year, this is one of the weakest I've actually seen. Like the good offenses that he's faced basically all year are pretty much Toronto. They've been struggling quite a bit too, and Milwaukee in that most recent game. Granted, he did pretty well in both of those games, but he really has not faced like a potent lineup all year. And the Red Sox aren't really one either, but they're not that bad. And in limited playing time, the Red Sox have hit him decently. They're 4 for 12 off him with a double, one strikeout, no walks, 333 batting average, and 750 OPS. So not that much you can take away from that, but the Red Sox have not really struggled to hit him, although it's only 4 guys who have seen him before, and I think Devers is hurt. Devers is 1 for 2 off him, so if you take him out, they're 3 for 11 off him, which is still not bad, but so that does mean only 3 of the Red Sox hitters have seen him before, but still, Sanchez's whip is quite high, man, and in that small sample size, I mean, he just hasn't done that well against the Red Sox. I think the value lies in the Red Sox here, man. I think people are going to look at this and say, oh, Nick Pivetta, he's got a 3.4 ERA. So that's like a run higher than Sanchez's ERA. So he's obviously the worst of the 2 pitchers, right? I don't think so because the whips are very, very there's a significant difference in their whips, and it's an advantage to Pivetta with a .94 whip. He's putting fewer than 1 base runner per inning on, whereas Sanchez is in the 1.3. So that's a significant difference. Pivetta has really been keeping guys off the base paths, man. And look at his numbers this year. 31 hits allowed and 42 and a third. He's not been that hittable. 9 walks and 51 strikeouts. His command has been quite good, even though it's been worse in his last few starts, walking 3, 2, and 2. But those were against Milwaukee and Atlanta for 2 of those 3, and Detroit. So 2 really good offenses, and then a Detroit offense that kind of has been turning it on as well. And his worst 2 starts of the season have been against Milwaukee and Atlanta, in the other start that he made against Atlanta. In his most recent start, he had a 7-inning, 1-hit performance against him. An excellent start from Pivetta. Does that mean he's going to regress coming into this game? I'm not so sure, man, because he might be pumped up for it because he's facing another, like one of the teams that's the best team with like the best record in the NL or one of the best records in baseball. So he might still be focused for this one, whereas maybe Philly will be the team to take their eye off the ball a little bit because their record is so good. They're facing like a below 500 Red Sox team. They already won yesterday. So I think the Red Sox would be in the bounce back, like the refocus type of scenario here. But yeah, Pivetta, I mean, his numbers in 51 strikeouts. His strikeout rate has been really high this season. Really good strikeout walk ratio as well. Shows you that he has command. He has allowed 8 home runs, which is a little bit high. And I think like some things have to like kind of move back to the mean though. And Sanchez has somehow only allowed 1 home run so far this season. So again, something is like got to give. Like that's keeping his ERA down quite a bit. The fact that he's hardly allowed any home runs, that's like way lower than what you would expect with the amount of pitching that he's done. You would expect that he would have allowed more than 1 home run. And I think it's just kind of a weird like outlier stat so I expect him to regress a little bit, and I expect Pivetta's ERA to maybe even go down slightly based on the way that he's pitched. And against Philly's lineup, I mean, they do have a little bit more familiarity with Pivetta, although still only 6 of them have seen him before. But they're 7 for 32 off him. Although they do have 2 doubles, 4 home runs off him, and 8 RBIs, and an 11-8 strikeout walk ratio. So that scares me a little bit, but it's a .219 batting average against Pivetta. So that's good, but shockingly, because of all those extra base hits, a 1,031 OPS. So it's like, what do you do there? Like, I'm on the side of, I think those extra base hits are a little bit fluky. I think that the batting average is a better indicator than the OPS in this case. Like the fact that he's allowed 4 home runs, I think that's kind of a fluke. Bryce Harper has really been the one guy that's totally dominated him. And it's one guy who's done all that damage basically with 2 home runs and 4 of the walks off him. You're not going to face Harper more than like 3 or 4 times in the game, basically, if that. So he can only do so much damage with those times that he's going to be up. So I think it makes more sense to look at the fact that the rest of the guys have struggled hitting him. The .219 batting average against Pivetta, I think, is a better indicator there. So I like all that. So that's going to be it, man. So Boston Red Sox is actually going to be the play there. So I'm playing on one Boston team and against the other one. So Boston Red Sox plus 106 in baseball. I can get them at an underdog price. And Dallas Mavericks minus 1.5 in basketball. If you can still get that price. If you can't, you may want to look like money line or whatever. That's going to do it for me, man. Have a good one. Peace.